Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Legend of Korra Book 3 Change episode review. This one's going to be for K308, The Terror Within. I think by the end of this episode it's going to be mainly remembered for being the last episode of Korra to air on TV with the whole move to digital thing, but overall, I think this was a pretty good episode. It was a complete change, obviously, to the previous, 3 episodes where there wasn't a lot of action going on, apart from the Red Lotus escape in one of the episodes. They were all very character-focused, and, there were, dramatic stuff with the whole Lin family drama with Sue, and the, again, family drama with Tenzin at the Northern Air Temple. But with this episode we get a more action-packed episode, a return to the main plot of the series, and I think overall just an episode that really has got the book kind of on track going into the last few episodes. Things are set up here now to be really interesting. Obviously just a lot of mysteries, a lot of stuff not quite connecting up, what's the Earth Queen going on, what's that all about? I assume that would come into play as we go on, because I think there's something bigger kind of going on than we suspect. But I'll get into that as I go through my notes about the episode. Don't have as many about this one, just because it is just one plot throughout the episode. It's just one continuous sequence of events that happens, and it works for the episode because it needed to get back on track after not really addressing kind of the key points for a while. But yeah, we start off with Korra and Bolin training metal bending with Wei and Wing, and Korra has basically metal bending police cables and is using them, which I think is really cool if she potentially keeps those as a other weapon to have to use her metal bending when she needs to, and that she actually beats one of the brothers in the sparring contest after losing the kind of first round. And then Bolin still hasn't got metal bending, but there seems to be a level of kind of hope that he can do it in the training. But they set up here that he's actually just really amazing in earth bending with the whole accuracy of the little stones he can throw, which is a really cool setup for how he eventually takes out kind of Pali later on in the episode. Not takes her out, but just kind of stops her powers temporarily. That was pretty cool. They very quickly kind of get Opal out of the way, which was one of my kind of fears going into this episode, knowing that the kidnap attempt was going to happen. Would the kidnap attempt happen before Opal leaves or after Opal leaves? Because one way, that means Opal's not going to the temple, the other means she is. So I liked that she left and then the attack happened, because you now get we're now going to get an interesting dynamic when we eventually return to the Northern Air Temple, because Opal's going to arrive. How is she going to be in terms of, the rest of the recruits? Is she going to be right up there with Kai at the top of the class? Those two haven't met yet. I don't think so. Yeah, the Kai and Opal haven't met, so that's going to be an interesting kind of character interaction if they get to some scenes together and stuff like that. So we've got some interesting stuff coming. Also, I don't think Opal has met Tenzin or the Air Kids yet, because they left just before they arrived in Zaofu. So, Jinora meeting Opal. There's some interesting character interactions coming up if we get some focus on the Air Temples with Opal. And overall, I think that's a good kind of way to do her character. She's not going to go with Team Avatar. Maybe she'll join up towards the end of the book when they're needed. And again, that's another kind of thing going on in the book that we're not quite sure of its involvement in the overall season. What is the role of the rest of the air nomads, air nation basically, in the book? What are they going to do from here on out? I assume they'll come back into play when the Earth Queen comes back into play, in that most of them come from Ba Sing Se and the Earth Queen capturing them, so maybe there'll be a level of connection in their stories. But anyway, Varric comes into play a little bit more in this episode. At first you think he's just going to have that random scene with the airbender detector that just is a weird, that the concept just doesn't work. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like an airbender detector. You actually need someone to airbend into it, and it's just like, don't you know they're an airbender just from them? I don't know, airbending into this thing. You don't need this thing to say that they're an airbender, unless they're gonna do some crazy reveal that like Zahir and all the new airbenders aren't actually airbenders or something like that. But I don't think they'll be able to do that. You know, that's just complete crazy speculation based on this item that he's invented. Apparently, I don't think it's gonna play any important role. But he does come in later and kind of references, you know, what he did to Mako, and that this whole conspiracy in Zaofu seems, you know, having done this before, this seems very convenient. You know, maybe you guys should think about this a little bit more. And then Mako's already suspicious, and from this he kind of fully goes, you know, I suspect Aiwei, and that makes sense. So interesting that he's coming more and more into the series. Still want to know what his overall kind of arc is going to be this book, and what role he's going to play. Something about magnets, I take it, is coming up, but I'm not really sure. After this is basically Red Lotus arriving, Red Lotus leaving, suspicion switching from the guard to Aiwei, to end of episode, basically. It's a crazy sequence of events, very action-packed. You know, and there's only so much like I can talk about the fight scenes. What I did like about this fight scene was that it didn't kind of ruin like the potential for further fights later on in the series, in that this was, you know, a kidnapping attempt. It wasn't like a very kind of personal fight. It was a group versus another group. You didn't really see them pair off into kind of one-on-one fights, so they're kind of keeping that for later on, because like we know stuff is coming up from trailers like Mako versus Minghua, I think Bolin versus Gazan, Lin, Zahir. So they're keeping all of these one-on-one fights, kind of more personal fights for later on in the book, while this was just a really awesome kind of group battle, as you just like this really big action set piece, almost like a kind of war type battle, as the Red Lotus are trying to defend and eventually escape with Korra, and everyone else is set on trying to protect Korra. So it was it worked pretty nicely, I think, over the course of the episode, that you had the fight kind of go that way. Still getting over how powerful the Red Lotus members are, especially Gazan in this episode, with just how unique that lava bending kind of move is, and what it allowed them to do, in that just him lava bending the ground around them separated them from the rest of them, so it turned into more of a range battle, and it was cool from a kind of tactical point of view in the battle that happened, without kind of completely going overboard with the lava bending. He was just doing some basic moves, wasn't the focus of the fight. Minghua, not around much water, wasn't at the biggest like advantage here, so she was mainly just defending. Instead, it was kind of Pali was the focus of this battle, where like she was keeping them from kind of jumping over across with her combustion bending. She showed us she could like bend the kind of explosions, and that she could make it go that way, turn and then explode, which was very unique. So she's obviously a more kind of a cultured bender, as opposed to Combustion Man, who is just like explode, explode, explode. She uses a bit of normal firebending as well, in addition to her skill. So that's really cool. And she's also really tall, I think we saw here. She's like the tallest in the group, and I think at the core panel they basically said she's in or around 6'8" or something like that. I don't know if they were just joking when they said that, but either way, she seems like the tallest of the group, so that should be cool if they ever like shows a scene when they really get to see how tall she is compared to other people. But what else was there to talk about with the fight? What do I have here? It was just interesting that how the attack took place, and you saw everyone basically in their pajamas. Like no one except the guards fully prepared for this fight. So that was really cool, getting to see the characters in their pajamas. Mako and Bolin in the middle of a crazy fight, you know, in their underwear. It was really kind of unusual, but kind of worked. And you could just get to see how powerful benders the brothers are. And of course, the main setup for this is that Lin and Sue go to kind of cable in basically from the top of the dome to get Korra out, but they need Pili kind of taken out, her combustion bending taken away from her for a while. So they kind of put the pressure on Bolin. We're like, do what you did before in the fight. Mako points it out, and eventually, last second, little rock straight to the kind of third eye chakra, blocking it temporarily. They go in, get Korra out. That's cool. And then the Red Lotus just leave. They just fail in their kidnap attempt and leave. But after this, the episode switches to being more of a kind of mystery type episode, kind of like The Sting a little bit, with Varric, kind of as he kind of brought up himself. And I liked Mako kind of coming more into things and him being very useful in this episode, because he hasn't really been much of a focus at all since like the first episode, more or less. And I like how they're just really getting across that even with Lin there and all these other characters, guards and stuff like that, Mako is still like the best detective. He's the most intelligent. He's one of the most intelligent characters in the show. I think that's fair to say, and it makes sense that he's the one who kind of figures these things out. He's the detective. Lin is kind of the police chief because of her leadership qualities, while Mako is more of the just natural detective sort of character. So I like that straight away he's like, this doesn't really work for me, you know, this kid is 18 years old, the Red Lotus have been in prison for over 13 years, this kid would have been 5 when they were out. I just don't see any way, if he grew up here, how he could possibly be involved in the Red Lotus. This doesn't work for me, and that made complete sense. Because, yes, there's a way for it to have happened, but the logic was very, very sound. And so, when Varric brings up the idea to Mako that, you know, like, what if the same thing that I did to you is happening here? And then he kind of puts it together that Aiwei, he's the one, he was so trusted that he was put in charge of the interrogations. He could decide if he was the person he wanted to frame because he was so trusted. And obviously he was the one to plant the evidence, so that made sense. And then you get them going into his house and investigating, and again, maybe a little bit of setup with the whole sand in a jar thing, the jar that had kind of this sand pattern on it, and clear setup that, okay, we're going to the Misty Palms Oasis, we're going to the desert next episode, Siwang Desert. So that brings into play kind of the whole Suyin Aiwei thing, and she was formerly part of a sandbender colony. But yeah, there was a little bit of setup here for something between Suyin and Aiwei, in that I know a lot of people are beginning to be suspicious of Suyin just because, you know, she was a little bit shifty, I suppose, when Aiwei was revealed to be kind of a traitor. But overall, I think it's just like, as she says later on, she considered him a member of the family. He was effectively second in charge of the city. Like he's her assistant basically. She trusts him with so much part of running of Zaofu, and then to find out he's a traitor, it's a big moment for her to find out that he's been betrayed. And I think the last part of the episode, when she goes against Lin's wishes and gives them the jeep to go off and find Aiwei, kind of shows that she's just a little bit betrayed here by Aiwei, and that's why she's that way. I don't think there's anything like at play, like Suyin's like a villain or anything like that. But I think the idea of Aiwei as part of the Aiwei as basically part of this group is really interesting, because as of yet in the series they haven't actually mentioned the idea of the Red Lotus. That has a concept, hasn't been mentioned. So when it is brought up, I think it's going to be really interesting. But it's not just these 4 now that are part of it. The Red Lotus appears to be this organization of people who feel similarly to Zahir and co. So Aiwei's a part of it. Potentially the Earth Queen is a part of it. That could come into play, as well as a lot of other people. Like, if there is something going on with Sue, maybe she's a part of it. There's some crazy stuff, like, potentially happening here with the Red Lotus, and whenever that concept is introduced and what the group actually is. Obviously, like, it was basically, you know, Misty Palms Oasis where we kind of first really started to hear about the Order of the White Lotus when Iroh was talking about it. So it'd be really interesting if Misty Palms Oasis kind of desert style areas where we start hearing about the Red Lotus. It would be a nice kind of connection, just to find out what exactly it's about. Um, but yeah, it creates a way for everything to kind of come together. The whole Earth Queen thing come together with everything else. That what if she's a part of this? What if she's also kind of helping Zahir and stuff like that? That works as a way to connect everything together. So that's really interesting. Um, what else do I have here? The whole bomb scene was really kind of, didn't expect that. Just like to see Korra walk in, boom, and then she saves everyone with airbending. Really kind of cool scene. Just to, again, Korra with a bombing scene again. We had one last book. We had some bombings in book 1, so we better see some bombings in book 4 just to keep that whole train going. And then, yeah, obviously they want to go after the Red Lotus and find out what they're about. And then they get the Jeep and they're off. Team Avatar back together. It's a really cool thing, I think, just that we're going to get Team Avatar basically hunting the Red Lotus, investigating, and right now that they're in a position where it just really feels like Avatar The Last Airbender again. You have a group on their own, not part of like some kind of big kind of party doing this. Sorry, my camera just cut out there. I just want to say it's kind of cool to get to see Team Avatar on their own, just a party. Nothing else really going on, just like roaming around the world searching for the Red Lotus. It's going to be cool to really like see that again. And overall this episode just put a lot of things in place for the series, and I just really did enjoy it. So that's been the review. Thanks for watching. Also, I'll just say Korra Roundtable for this episode will be posted later on today on the site avatarthelastairbender.online.com. SDCC discussion podcast special will be tomorrow, Sunday, on the podcast. So thanks for watching, and bye.